Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by to see me. I am back today with part 2 in the 3-part scene building series I am sharing with all of you. Today my focus is going to be on color, specifically coloring that panel that I had stamped for you in the last video. Now I totally understand that color is so personal to everybody. But I also understand that there's some folks that they're just not sure what colors to use, how they should use them, and why they should use them. And this video is geared more towards that. I also have my own personal favorites, but I also will step outside of my comfort zone occasionally and go with something different. With this scene that I'm working with, I have elephants on here, and that is the first thing that my eye is drawn to when I look at it. So I know that I want them to be gray, and you're welcome to color in your elephants any color you would like. If you would like them pink with purple polka dots, then do that. I want gray, and gray is a wonderful neutral color, so I could pair any color I would like with it. However, the second thing I'm taking into consideration with this is I have those little cherries, and then I have those fruit slices. Now those could be oranges, those could be lemons and oranges. I've done both on both of the samples that I've shown you at the beginning of the video. But on this one, when I initially looked at it, I instantly thought of oranges. So I have red and orange and gray, and I would like to incorporate all those colors with something a little extra. Now, this is my Pinterest feed. This board is titled Love Me Some Color. That one you saw up there in the top left, that is going to be what I use as my inspiration. But I strongly suggest that if you use Pinterest, that you also have a board where you pin lots of different color samples. It's an excellent starting point. It's a good resource to have when you just don't know what you want to do. And I'm a maniac. I probably have thousands of these things on here. And you don't need to be as crazy as I am about it, but just it's something to keep in mind, and it's something that you'll find handy if you use it. Now, the other thing that I suggest that you have in your stash, and I've got to be honest, folks, I have had this since I was in college, which was like 2002. So it's in rough shape, but I love this tool. This is my color wheel, and I use it all the time. Sometimes I can't always remember off the top of my head what colors would go well with each other. So I just grab this handy little thing and I take a peek at it, and usually I'm good to go. It's totally worth the investment. I will have links for this down below. Now, I don't know if they still make this particular one, but there's tons of them out on the market, including a really large one that I think you can get for Amazon. I think the last time I looked, it was $8, which sounds like a lot of money, but these are worth every penny. So these are the colors I'm going to use on my card today. And yes, I stamped them all out and I swatched them. However, I had a gaggle of giggling girls in my craft room, and all work comes to a halt when those girls come in because I can't focus. So I thought while I was listening to their shenanigans, I would swatch this out. But this will give you a good idea of what I'm going for and how these colors work together. Okay, so now it is time to start coloring in our card panel. And I'm going to be honest, folks, this video is not at all geared towards technique. There is so much going on this panel that we really don't need to concern ourselves with the technique. We just need to simply get it colored in. So I'm actually going to start with the cherries. There's no rhyme or reason as to why I start with a particular image. I just decided that I wanted to start coloring in those little cherries. So I'm going to use red, and these are my go-to reds. I use these all the time. I think they are a perfect classic red. Now I am going to use an R59 for my deepest shadow color, and it's dark, folks. It is really dark. If you're not comfortable with that, an R29 or an R27 would be a really good alternative. But I really wanted to give these a little bit of punch. I want them to stand out a little bit because they're itty bitty and they make a huge impact on this scene. I hope I didn't have that going too fast for you. I basically just drew a C shape on each one, going from lightest to darkest, then darkest back up to lightest, making sure to blend in everything with my lightest color, and then I called it a day. Now I'm going to color in that little ribbon that is on that stand, and I'm also going to color this red. I want to show you that making sure that I keep my shadows where the ribbon threads in and out of the stand. And again, it's not a special technique. I'm basically just drawing light lines with my darkest color and then blending it back out to my lightest. It's a small area, so I need to keep that in mind. Otherwise, I'm going to have red everywhere. And we don't want that. Red is the hardest to fix. Now, I thought I was recording. I was not. So I had already colored in this cupcake in my blue greens. And I am going to show you another one. There is another way that you can color these. And it actually makes it look like there's more detail to the cupcake wrapper. But I'm not going to do that. For me personally, I really struggled with it. So I'm going to show you an easier way to do it. It still gives those cupcake wrappers some depth and dimension, but you don't have to kill yourself doing it, and it definitely does not take anyone out of their comfort zone. So looking at the cupcakes, we really want to play out the roundness of the cupcake itself. And so by doing that, we're going to just lay down a light layer of our lightest color. And then we'll go in with our darkest and work our way out to our lightest. We want the darkest starting at the bottom and working their ways up the sides. And then again, we move back out to our lightest color. There's nothing special here. The only thing I would like to note is I already have an idea of where I'm going to place all of my colors on my card panel already. Because I have so many of them, I want to make sure that I really spread them out across my card, at least use them 2 or 3 times so everything looks more cohesive. So here I am going in with my darkest color and working my way out to my lightest, and that's it. It's as easy as that and nothing special. Okay, so for the wrappers that have the polka dots in them, I want those dots to be white. And then I also want the wrappers with the cupcakes that have the daisies on them, I want those to be white as well. So we simply just need to color in the shadow, and we're going to do that with the cool grays, and I'm just going around the edges, and then that plain wrapper I'm coloring in the same exact way as I did the others, again just with the cool grays. Now I'm going to take in my blue greens, and I'm trying to be somewhat mindful of those dots because I don't want those blue-green, but I'm leaving a larger highlight in the center than what I did on the plain wrappers. So I'm going to start working on the elephants, and I'm just going to show you one because they're essentially all colored in the same. And I'm just mapping out my shadows with my lightest color, and that is my C0. And I'm going to be pretty conservative on how dark I make these elephants. We already have some really dark, bold colors going on in our card panel already, so we need to keep that in mind. If we make our elephants too dark, they're just going to blend in with everything else, and then that really defeats the purpose of having elephants in the scene, and these guys are part of the show. So I'm just basically using the tip of my marker to map out where my shadows are going to go, and then I work from lightest to darkest, back out darkest to lightest, and I'm only making those lines just a tiny bit thicker each time I go over it, and then I'm going to finish that out with my C0, and I'm going to call it a day. At this point, you can still see some depth and dimension to our guys, but they're not too dark. And then I used my R20 and my R22 to color in their ears, and we're going to leave those at that because those don't need to be anything special either. So the flowers, you can color these flowers in any color you want, but I'm going to focus on some more white because again, we already have dark, bold colors working on our panel here. So we were going to use that white to our advantage and help these guys stand out a little bit more on their own. Plus, I really liked the idea of making these look like more like a daisy, because that yellow will show up here and there on our card panel, and it will really blend in well with the other colors that we have going on. And coloring in the white on the icing in the flowers is the same principle as any other time. You're just simply coloring in the shadows. Just be sure that you actually leave some legitimate white on your image so it will look white after everything else is colored in. Now I'm coloring some of these icings in yellow. I didn't want red because our elephant's ears are red and those candies are going to be red. This wrapper is already turquoise and we already have plenty of orange going on. So I thought the coloring these in yellow would help finish tying everything in as it is. Now, the oranges, don't get excited, folks. Just color them in any way you like. Nobody's going to notice any special detail on them. So now I'm going to color in the stand, and I want the stand to be white. And when I'm done with it, you're going to think that it looks gray. But after everything is completed on this card, it will look white. I'm using 2 colors on this. Just kidding, maybe 3. I'm starting with my C0 and I'm just adding where I want my shadows to be. I want the stand to look round, so I'm focusing around the edges there, and I'm just using the tip of my marker, and I'm trying to be careful how far I bring this out. And then I'm going to go in with my C3. I believe this is the lightest color. Yep, I only use 2. And I'm blending that out, and I'm calling it a day. Okay, so I'm coloring in my balloons. All of my balloons are going to be colored the same way, just in different colors. So I'm showing you this one, and I've got to be honest, I really loathe coloring balloons. I love balloons on a card. I just don't like coloring them in. That's just me personally, and this card wouldn't have been the same without them, so I pulled up my big girl britches and I did them anyways. I suppose that they look just fine. They're just not one of my favorite things to do. Okay, so now that we're done with our balloons, I'm going to get my EK Success journaling pen and I'm going to draw the threads onto our jar. Now the top of that jar looks kind of iffy. My lines are not perfect, and that's fine. Again, nobody's going to notice if everything isn't exact or the way they think it should look. I promise you, folks are just going to be like, wow, you made this, and that's all we're going for. It's just fine. So I'm just drawing straight lines, but I'm staggering the lines, and then I'm also making sure that I'm varying the lengths. And then the other important thing to keep in mind is you want some of those that are right up against your edges, because we're creating the illusion that this is round, and we could put a round lid on it. Now I'm just extending my lollipop sticks because I want those to look like they actually go down inside the jar. And then once I'm done with those, I'm just going to go reinforce the lines that I've already drawn in. I'm happy with how this looks, so I just want to make sure that my lines look a little bit cleaner. Again, this is not something that you necessarily need to do. This is a personal preference for me, but you could totally move on from there. If you're at all nervous when you start drawing those lines in, by all means use a pencil. Make sure that you like what you have, and then you can go back in with your pen. Just make sure that whatever pen you're using is Copic friendly, because we're going to be Copic coloring over the top of this later, and we don't want our ink to smear. Okay, at this point, I'm looking at my elephant that's on top of that jar, and not only do I realize that I missed his legs that are hanging down there the first time I colored him, but also I realize that I really need to reinforce the shadows on him, because these candies are going to be really dark. We need him to look like he has a lot more depth and dimension without making him look too dark. So I'm just going in and reinforcing those shadows a little bit more before I start working on the candies. Now, the candies are going to be fun to watch because y'all get to see what it's like when your red marker bleeds out on your card panel, and you'll actually see me have a moment where I freak out a little bit, and then I'm like, how am I going to fix this? But it's okay because it worked out, and again, we have a lot going on those panels, so people are only going to notice so much, and I did manage to save it. The first thing I'm doing is just going over all of the candies with my lightest color. This is the R20. And by the way, I will have all of the Copic colors listed in the YouTube description below, as well as links for them over on my blog if you're interested in what specific colors I use today. And I'm just making sure that I have everything filled in. I want a first initial coat for no other reason than it helps my eye focus better on all of those individual little candies. It helps separate them from my little elephant and the cupcake wrappers, so I can visually see what I'm doing better. Now I'm taking my R59. This is going to be my shadow color, and this is also going to be the color that's going to bleed out underneath our jar here in a moment or two. And I'm just going around the elephant right now. I want this elephant to look like he is outside of the jar, so I really need to enforce those shadows, and we're going to reinforce them even further when we start coloring in the jar. But if you don't give him a shadow behind him, almost his whole body, he's going to look like he's sitting inside the jar, and we definitely don't want that. With that R59, I'm just focusing on the lower half of the jar. Everything that is sitting back behind those two cupcakes that are in the front are going to get the R59. As we go towards the top, I will use my next lightest color before the R59. Now I'm separating out each of those candies. Again, I'm just focusing on the lower half of the jar because this would actually be your darkest area. And I'm trying to go as light as I possibly can, just using the tip of my marker. However, my first indication that something was going to go down here was I'm just using the tip, but as my marker touches the paper, it spreads out, the ink spreads out more than what it should. So you'd think I would have had a clue that something was going to go wrong. But I just kept forging on, hoping that nothing bad was going to happen. And unfortunately, it does. So I'm going through the bottom of the jar, and look at that right there. And I'm like, what? So here's how you deal with this, boys and girls. Let it dry. Do not touch it. Do not collect $200 and do not pass go. Let it dry. Move on. Then once it dries, take your colorless blender and push it back in just like that. Don't keep working at it. Just do it a little bit. Again, let it dry, move on to something else, and you just keep going back and working on it until it disappears. That's the best that you can do. I promise eventually it'll go away or it will lighten up, but just be patient. And I'm so sorry, folks. We blew through those lollipop wrappers while I was trying to explain to you how to clean up that mess. They're really easy. Anything you want to go further in the back, you color in with your darkest color. Anything you want to bring to the front and make look more round, you use your lightest color. Those are actually really easy and quick to do. Now we can afford some brown on our card panel, and I like chocolate, so I thought I'd make our cupcakes look like they're chocolate cupcakes. Again, this is super duper easy. I'm just reinforcing the shadows with my darkest color and working my way back out to my lightest, so those also look round. And now we're going to color in our jar. We need to have some color on our jar because it needs to look three-dimensional. So I'm using my cool grays again, because we have the red with in the candies. It won't blend into our elephant. It will just make it look more round. And I'm concentrating on the threads and the side of the jar. But when I do the sides, I make sure that I don't go all the way to the edge because we need a little bit of reflection there. And then we're going to reinforce that some more when we finish off our card on the next video, I believe. Okay, so we are on the downhill slide here. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ground my images, and I want them to look like they're on a tabletop or a countertop. I started a little bit higher on this daisy, and then I decided that was a little bit too high, so I'm going to go a little bit lower. That's fine. We can clean that up with the colorless blender later. The only thing to note here is you want to make sure that these look symmetrical. So however high up you go on one side, you need to make sure that you go up at the same height on the other. Otherwise, it's going to throw the perspective off. It'll look like you're looking at this scene at a diagonal, and you don't want that. It'll look funny. I'm making sure to also stretch out the shadow on our elephant because that's going to help reinforce that he is setting in front of the jar as opposed to inside the jar. And then I'm just working from lightest to darkest to lightest, and I'm making sure that I blend that out. And I do believe that I actually go back over this the final time with a C00. That'll help really make everything smooth out more and blend out, and then the lines don't look so harsh. Actually, that's not true. I actually go over this one final time with my colorless blender and blend everything out. You could skip that and just stop with a C00 and be just fine. I just thought I needed to take it a step further, but it was probably unnecessary. That's it. I will see you tomorrow with part 3 in this series. Do be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well as head over to my blog for more details and links. I do hope you enjoyed my card today. Thanks so much for stopping by. Until next time.